Let's talk about fractions and percents. If you want to take a minute and pause this video so you can go over what's in blue, I encourage it. Now let's move on. So we're going to solve this first example by changing all these fractions to 100%. So I'm just going to do some of them. It does say round to the nearest tenths if necessary. So I wanted to do, let's do D and let's do F. All right, so talking about D first. If we're going to put it in percent, that's the same as saying, oh, let's multiply it by 100%. However, there is a shortcut. If you use the shortcut, we need to put it in decimal form. So we'll do that one next, okay? So first things first, I got 11 times 100%, all divided by 20 times 1. I know that 20 will go into itself one time, and it'll go into 100 5 times. Now I got 11 times 5 is 55% over 1, so we just got 55%. Now, what if we wanted to change it to decimal first? Then we're going to do long division. The numerator, the top number always goes on the inside, and the bottom number goes on the outside. Now I ask, how many times will 20 go into 11? Well, it won't. So we're going to have to put a decimal and a 0. Now, how many times will 120 happen in 110? Oh, I said 120. My apologies, guys. How many times will 20 appear in 110? Well, don't forget to bring your decimal to the top. I left that off. I had to put there. It'll go into it 5 times. 5 times 20 is 100. 110 minus 100 is 10. And let's bring down our 0. Again, 20 will go into 100 5 times. 5 times 20 is 100. Subtract, we'll get 0. So now I have a decimal of 0.55. And if I want to put it in percent, I can grab this decimal 1, 2, and move it 2 places to the right, and it gives me my 55%. All right, so let's look at F here. F is a mixed number, and we're going to put it into percent. So you can multiply it by 100%. You can change it to a decimal and then move it. Let's change it to a decimal first. I noticed that I have this whole number, which means it goes in front of the decimal. That leaves me figuring out what decimal form is this fraction. So top number goes inside the doghouse, and bottom number goes on the outside. We ask ourselves, how many times will 5 go into 2? 0 times. We got to add a decimal. Don't forget to bring it to the top, and let's put a 0 behind it. Now I say 5 goes into 20. How many times? 4. 4 times 5 is 20. 20 minus 20 is 0. So now I have 3.4. And if I'm putting it in percent, I can move it 1, 2 to the right, and I get 340%. We can do it that way, or you can put it as an improper fraction, multiply by the 100%, and then reduce. Okay. I guess we can do I that way. Let's do I, because we solved it as a decimal. Let's do I as a fraction. So well, that means we're going to convert it to an improper fraction. And whenever we do this, the denominator doesn't change. So bring it over. Now I say 9 times 2. So it's denominator times whole number plus the numerator. So 9 times 2 is 18 plus 2 is 20. So I got 29. So what I could do is say, okay, now I'm going to multiply this by 100%. And while we have it set up, we're going to ask ourselves, will it reduce? Well, I know 20 is made up of 2s and 5s. 100 is made up of 5s and 2s, and the denominator is made up of 3. So nothing's going to reduce, right? So we want to, since nothing reduced, we want to go ahead and multiply straight across. If it does reduce, then always reduce. So now I have the 20 times that 100, and I get 2,000 over 9%. Of course, we're going to want to write this in decimal form. You don't want to leave it as a fraction unless told to. It did say round to the nearest hundreds. So it's going to be 22 or tenths, I believe. Let me double check. I said hundreds, but I meant it rounds to the nearest tenths. We have to go out to the nearest hundreds place to determine what happens to the tenths. So we look at that number behind it and ask, is it equal to or greater than 5? If it's yes, you add 1 to the tens place. If it's no, you just drop that off. All right. And this is percent. Don't forget a percent sign. All right. So on this one, during the years 1921 to 2012, the Los Angeles Dodgers baseball team played in 18 World Series championships and won 6 of them. What percent of these championships did the Dodgers win? So in the denominator, we always put the total. So there was total 18 World Series and they won 6. So we got it in fraction form. I'm going to go ahead and reduce it if I can. I do notice that 6 is 2 times 3, and I know 18 is 6 times 3. Oh, we could have left the 6 on top and reduced the whole thing, right? And what happens? I get the 1, 3 goes into itself 1 times. Now I got 2, 6. 2 goes in itself once and goes into 6 3 times. And now I got 1/3. Let's multiply it by 100% or put it in decimal form. Either way it goes, we're going to eventually put it in decimal form. So let's go ahead and do that. Again, if you was to use long division, it said round to the nearest tenths. Okay, so let's do that. The top number goes on the inside, the bottom number goes on the outside. 3 goes into 1 0 times. Let's add a decimal, 3 goes into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. 10 minus 9 is 1. Bring down the 0. 3 goes into 10 3 times. So we have a repeating. That 3 is repeating. So I'm going to put a bar above it, right? Because we're just going to continuous. So if we're going to round to the nearest tenths, let's go out 3 places. Oh, no, 4. Go out 4. Because when I multiply it by 100%, what's going to happen is 1, 2, right? I get this. And now we can round to the nearest tenths. I'm going to draw a line under the tenths and look behind it at the hundredths and determine, does this round the tenths up 1 or leave it alone? And it's going to, in this case, leave it alone because we ask, is it greater than or equal to 5? In this case, it's no. So this would be my answer. All right. Our next section, there in blue, if you want to take a minute, pause it to read it, I would go for it. Now, let's go ahead and do this. It says change the following percents to reduce fractions or mixed numbers. So it wants it in fraction form, not decimal. So be sure and read. And since we're undoing percents, that means we're going to divide by 100%. The percent signs reduce. Leaves me with 65 over 100. Which reduces by 5 for sure, right? So 65 divided, 65 divided by 5 is 13. So 13 times 5 gives me 65. And then the 100 divided by 5 is 20. So that means 5 times 20 gives me 100. So we're going to reduce by our 5s and leaves me 13 20s. And this is my fraction. All right. I wanted to show you something. What if you just wanted to move the decimal 1, 2, right? 1, 2. And this is what we got. It's out of percent because remember, if you move the decimal to the left 2 places, we're taking it out of percent because it's the same as dividing by 100%. Now we're going to write it. We can write it as a mixed number if we wanted. We can say, oh, the number in front of the decimal is the whole number. The number behind it is going to be my numerator. And how many decimal places? It's only 1, so it's a tens. Of course, 4 tenths reduce, so let's reduce. 4 is reducing by 2. 2 goes into 4 2 times. 2 goes into 10 5 times. And now I have my mixed number. So you could do that if you want. Okay. But first, take it out of percent, okay? Okay. There are 400 8th graders at Wilson Middle School. In the class president election, 268 students voted for Luke, 96 students voted for Alice, 36 students voted for Chris. I says, what percent of the 8th graders voted for Luke? So I'm going to make sure and put in my denominator the total students, which is 400. Let's look for Luke. Luke had 268 votes. So we want to see if this reduces. Well, 268 ends in an even number and 400 ends in 0. So let's try 2. We may even use 4. Who knows? So let's try 2. Over here on the side, I'm going to say, let's try 4. Why not? 4 goes into 26 6 times. 6 times 4 is 24. 26 minus 24 is 2. Bring down the 8. Oh, 4 goes into 28 7 times. And then 7 times 4 is 28. Remainder of 0. The reason I chose 4, so I'm going to say 4 times 67, right? The reason why I chose 4 is because I looked at the denominator. Even though it ended in 0, I knew that there's a possibility 2 may divide into it. But then I saw it was 400 at 4, so I know that 4 times 100. So I chose 4 to start with. 4 is reduced, leaves me with 67 100s. You want to make sure that it doesn't reduce before you move on because it's got to be in reduced form. But 67 does not reduce with 100. All right, so 100 is 5s and 2s. So now let's do this double I here. It says what percent of 8th graders voted for Chris? So again, I'm in the denominator. I'm going to put the total students, which is 400. Chris had 36 votes. We know that 4 goes into 400 100 times. And 4 goes into 36 9 times. The 4's reduced. And now I got 9 100s. And 9's made up of 3s. And it does not reduce with 100. So that was my final answer. Oh, wait 1 second. Let's go back to the underlying question. What did it ask us to solve for? In this class, students voted. Okay, make sure, because if it asked you to figure out what percent of the students voted, and it did, look right here in our questions here. So we're not completely done. So before I move on any further, let's go back and let's multiply this by 100%. Right? And what happens? The hundreds reduce. Now it leaves me with 67% of the students voted for Luke. Let's multiply this one by 100% because we're putting it in percent. And the hundreds reduce on this one. Now I'm left with 9% of the students voted for Chris. Now let's solve for Alice. Total of students goes on bottom, which is 400. Alice got 96 votes. So let's see if 4 will go into 96. 4 goes into 9 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8. 9 minus 8 is 1. Bring down the 6. 4 goes in 16 4 times. Gives me a remainder of 0. So I got 4 times 24 over 4 times 100. The 4 is reduced. Now, if you wanted to, we can go ahead and multiply by 100% right here because 24 100s do reduce, but you'll be putting the 100 back in when you multiply by the 100%. And I saw that I can reduce the 100s and save an extra step. So it leaves me with 24%. So my answer for all of these, let me get my highlighter, the color. Let's change it. Let's go to blue. So my answer is the 67% voted for Luke, 9% voted for Chris, 24% voted for Alice. Okay. Now, okay, we just have one more to go. So we have this table here. It says answer the following and express our answers in percent. So determine what percentage of the table is shaded red. So what I need to do is figure out what is my total here, right? My total box. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So 6 times 4 gives me 24. So my denominator is going to have 24 because there's a total of 24 boxes there. Now let's determine how many's red. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9's red. Now we're going to reduce this if we can. I know that 9 is made up of 3 times 3. And I know 24 is 3 times 8. And then let's not forget to multiply by 100%. I'm gonna put it over 1. My 3's reduce. And now I got 3/8 times 100%. Let's reduce this if we can. I know that 8 is made up of 2 times 4, and I know 4 times 25 gives me 100. So my 4's reduce. Now I got 3 times 25 over 2, and it's all in percent. Don't forget our percent. Okay, don't forget to carry that. 3 times 25 is 75%. If they want you to convert it to decimal, then I would do it. Just be sure and read. It would tell you to round to the nearest, and it did, to the nearest tenths, if possible. So in this case here, we have 37.5%. That's shaded red. All right. Let me highlight this right quick. Now let's go to the next one. It says determine what percentage of the table is shaded green. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to multiply this by 100%. And 5 is prime, and it will not go into 24. So I'm going to see if there's a number in 24 that will go into 100. Well, I know 4 will. Right? So now I got 5 times that 100. I'm doing an extra step. You do not have to do this extra step. Over 4 times 6. 4 goes into itself once, goes into 125 times. So now I have what? 5 times at 25 all over 6. Now let's get it in decimal form. And let me, all right, let's do this so I can have some room. So I'm going to say approximately, I get 20.8%. Be sure and round to the nearest tenths as it asks us. And this last one, determine what percentage of the table is shaded white. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. Oh, and we can multiply by 100%. So you can reduce the 10 and 24 by 2, and then that means we'll have 2 to reduce with the 100, or we can just go ahead and say, we know that 24 is 4 times 6, and I know that 100 is 4 times 25. My 4's reduce, and we still got something to reduce here. So 10 is 2 times 5, 6 is 2 times 3, and this is all but times 25 over 1%. My 2's reduce. Now I'm left with 5 times 25, which is 125 over 3, and it's percent. And so 125 divided by 3 gives me, and we're rounding to the nearest tenth, so it gives me 41.7%. And let me fix my 4 so it look like a 4. There we go. Well, that's terrible. All right. All right. Thank you.